Fooled by Randomness, the Hidden Role of Chance in Life and in the Markets, by Nassim Nicholas Taleb. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Power Books. Today we're embarking on a journey with one of the most provocative and paradigm-shifting thinkers of our time. We're diving into Fooled by Randomness, the Hidden Role of Chance in Life and in the Markets, by Nassim Nicholas Taleb. Have you ever looked at a successful person and assumed it was pure skill? Or wondered why seemingly brilliant strategies sometimes fail spectacularly while others succeed against all odds? Taleb's groundbreaking work forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth, that luck, chance, and randomness play a far more significant and often unseen role in our lives and in the financial markets than we dare to admit. This isn't just a book about probability. It's a profound challenge to how we interpret success and failure, how we construct narratives around events, and how our brains are fundamentally wired to misunderstand the very nature of uncertainty. Elvin will pull back the curtain on the illusion of predictability, expose the insidious effects of survivorship bias, and equip you with a radical new lens through which to view your decisions, your triumphs, and your setbacks. So, if you're ready to question everything you thought you knew about success, risk, and the hand of fate, hit that like button, subscribe to Power Books if you haven't already, and let's begin Fooled by Randomness. Part 1. The Illusion of Understanding. Chapter 1. The Importance of Luck, Nero, Tulip. In this provocative opening chapter, The Importance of Luck, Nero, Tulip, Nassim Nicholas Taleb immediately confronts the reader with his central thesis, that luck, or randomness, plays a far more significant and often hidden role in success, especially in fields like financial trading, than skill or determinism. To illustrate this, Elvin introduces the fictional character Nero Tulip, a highly successful and seemingly brilliant trader whose consistent profits would, on the surface, suggest extraordinary talent. Taleb meticulously deconstructs Nero's success, arguing that while skill might be a contributing factor, a substantial portion of his achievements is attributable to favorable sequences of random events. In other words, good luck. The chapter challenges our deeply ingrained tendency to attribute positive outcomes to our own abilities and negative outcomes to external misfortune. Taleb implicitly introduces the concept of alternative histories, suggesting that for every realized outcome, like Nero Tulip's fortune, countless other potential outcomes existed, many of which would have seen Nero fail. He highlights the silent evidence, the vast number of less fortunate traders who might have employed similar strategies but were simply dealt a different hand by randomness and thus remain unseen and unstudied. By focusing on Nero Tulip, Taleb aims to dismantle our simplistic narratives of success and encourage a more nuanced, probabilistic understanding of outcomes in complex, noisy environments like financial markets, setting the stage for a profound reevaluation of what we truly understand about performance. Key takeaways. 1. Dominance of luck. Nassim Nicholas Taleb introduces the central argument that randomness and luck play a far greater role in success, especially in trading, than commonly acknowledged. 2. Nero Tulip illustration. The chapter uses the fictional character of a successful trader, Nero Tulip, to exemplify how apparent skill can often be primarily the result of good fortune. 3. Challenging narratives. It provokes readers to question simplistic explanations of success, advocating for a more probabilistic view of outcomes. Silent evidence. The core message highlights our tendency to overlook the losers or unlucky, whose existence would contradict narratives of pure skill, thus leading to a biased understanding of success. Chapter 2. Alternative Histories and the Nature of Probability. In this pivotal chapter, Alternative Histories and the Nature of Probability, Nassim Nicholas Taleb deepens his assault on our misperception of randomness by thoroughly exploring the concept of alternative histories. He argues that for every event or outcome we observe, whether a successful trade, a career breakthrough, or a market crash, there existed a multitude of unseen, alternative paths that could have easily materialized but did not. Our natural tendency to focus solely on the realized outcome leads to a profound misunderstanding of the role of chance and fosters an illusion of inevitability or skill. Taleb likely illustrates this through various thought experiments, such as contemplating how a trader's success could have turned into ruin had a few random market fluctuations gone differently. He emphasizes that the cemetery of failures, all the alternative histories where things went wrong, remains largely invisible to us, skewing our perception of success towards skill rather than luck. The chapter probably delves into the nuances of probability over time, explaining that an event with a low probability in a single instance can become highly probable given enough trials or sufficient time. This discussion might touch upon the concept of ergodicity, or its absence in many real-world, particularly financial scenarios, highlighting why simply averaging outcomes across many people at one time doesn't necessarily predict the long-term experience of one person over time. Ultimately, Taleb reveals how our inability to properly account for these alternative histories fuels the narrative fallacy, compelling us to create coherent cause and effect stories out of inherently random processes, thus systematically underestimating the pervasive power of chance. Key takeaways. 1. Concept of alternative histories. Nassim Nicholas Taleb introduces and elaborates on the idea that for every observed outcome, countless other potential outcomes could have occurred, which we typically ignore. 2. Illusion of inevitability. Focusing only on the realized path leads to a skewed perception of success as purely skill-based, overlooking the role of random chance. 3. Probability and time. Misconceptions. The chapter explains how seemingly low probability events become highly probable given enough attempts or time, clarifying misunderstandings about long-term probability. 4. Critique of simplistic narratives. The core message emphasizes how our inherent desire to create linear stories from random events, the narrative fallacy, prevents us from grasping the true nature of uncertainty and luck. Chapter 3. The problem of induction, the limits of prediction. In this pivotal chapter, The Problem of Induction, the Limits of Prediction, Nassim Nicholas Taleb launches a frontal assault on one of the most fundamental flaws in human reasoning, particularly as it applies to financial markets and life, the problem of induction. He explains that induction involves drawing general conclusions from specific observations, for example, observing white swans for years and concluding all swans are white. The inherent flaw, Taleb argues, is that a single future observation, the discovery of a black swan, can entirely invalidate a lifetime of accumulated empirical evidence. Taleb's most famous and vivid illustration of this problem is the turkey problem. A turkey is fed kindly every day for 1,000 days by a butcher, inductively concluding that butchers are benevolent. On the 1,001st day, Thanksgiving arrives and the turkey's life ends. Its model of the world, based purely on past data, catastrophically failed at the most critical juncture. Taleb uses this powerful analogy to expose the profound dangers of relying solely on historical data for future prediction, especially in domains like finance where truly rare, unprecedented events, which he would later call black swans, can occur with devastating impact. He critiques the over-reliance of financial models and experts on historical observations, arguing that such inductive reasoning makes them blind to extreme, nonlinear events. The core message is that the absence of an event in the past does not guarantee its absence in the future, and understanding what hasn't happened yet is often more critical than what has been observed when assessing true risk and making robust decisions. Keyways. 1. The problem of induction defined. Nassim Nicholas Taleb explains that reasoning from past observations to general future conclusions is inherently flawed and vulnerable to a single contradictory event. 2. The turkey problem analogy. The chapter uses this iconic story to powerfully illustrate how relying solely on past data can lead to catastrophic failures when rare, unobserved events occur. 3. Critique of prediction. It highlights the severe limitations of using historical data and inductive reasoning for predicting future outcomes, especially in complex and unpredictable systems like financial markets. 4. The unobservable is key. The core message emphasizes that true understanding of risk requires acknowledging the significance of events that have not yet occurred, rather than being confined by observed history. Chapter 4. Survivorship Bias, the Hidden Graveyard. In this crucial chapter, Survivorship Bias, the Hidden Graveyard, Nassim Nicholas Taleb exposes one of the most pervasive cognitive illusions that distorts our understanding of success, particularly in probabilistic domains like finance. He defines survivorship bias as the logical error of focusing solely on the surviving examples, the winners, the thriving companies, the successful traders, while completely overlooking the vast number of failures, the hidden graveyard, of those who did not make it. This selective observation leads us to profoundly misinterpret the true role of skill versus luck. Taleb vividly illustrates this bias with compelling examples. In financial markets, he points out that we constantly hear about the hedge fund managers who generated astronomical returns, but we rarely see the equally numerous funds that failed and quietly disappeared from databases. This skewed dataset makes the industry appear far more consistently profitable than it is. Another classic example might be the World War II study, where statisticians initially recommended reinforcing parts of aircraft that returned with bullet holes, until it was realized that armor was actually needed in areas without bullet holes on the returning planes, because planes hit in those critical areas simply didn't survive to be examined. Taleb argues that this bias causes us to overestimate the role of skill, attribute success to specific strategies without acknowledging the role of favorable random events, and encourages us to form false narratives around success. Ultimately, the chapter warns against blindly imitating the strategies of winners without understanding the multitude of equally plausible paths that led to failure for others, and encourages a deeper, more comprehensive accounting for the unseen failures in any analysis of performance. Key takeaways. One definition of survivorship bias. Nassim Nicholas Taleb explains this bias as the error of focusing only on successful outcomes, ignoring the failures that are no longer visible. 2. Skewed perception of success. The chapter demonstrates how this bias leads us to overestimate skill and underestimate the pervasive role of luck in achieving success, particularly in financial markets. 3. Hidden failures. It highlights the silent evidence of those who failed, whose absence from our observations distorts our understanding of true probabilities and risks. 4. Caution against imitation. The core message warns against blindly imitating strategies of survivors without understanding the full spectrum of outcomes, including the high rate of failure among similar attempts. Part 2. Our misunderstanding of randomness. Chapter 5. Skewness and asymmetry when outcomes aren't normal. In this foundational chapter, Skewness and asymmetry when outcomes aren't normal, Nassim Nicholas Taleb dives into the critical statistical properties of randomness that we frequently misunderstand, particularly in financial contexts. He challenges the widespread, yet often dangerously misleading, assumption that most real-world phenomena, especially financial returns, conform to a normal distribution or a symmetrical bell curve. Taleb argues that many crucial outcomes are instead characterized by skewness and asymmetry, meaning that positive and negative deviations are not equally likely or of equal magnitude. Elvin meticulously defines skewness, explaining that a positively skewed right-skewed distribution has a long tail of rare, very large positive outcomes, while most results are clustered on the lower side. An example might be an investment that yields many small gains, but offers a rare chance for a massive payout. Conversely, he emphasizes the pervasive danger of negatively skewed, left-skewed distributions in financial markets, where outcomes are typically clustered around smaller gains, but there's a long tail of infrequent, yet devastatingly large negative losses. Taleb highlights that assuming normality when outcomes are skewed leads to a severe underestimation of extreme risk, as traditional metrics like standard deviation fail to capture the true probability and potential impact of these rare, large deviations. The chapter implicitly introduces the concept of extremistan, where outcomes are dominated by extreme events, versus mediocristan, where averages hold sway, urging readers to understand that financial markets often reside in the former, necessitating a radical shift in how we measure and manage risk by acknowledging the non-symmetrical nature of outcomes. 1. Challenging normality. Nassim Nicholas Taleb argues that many financial outcomes do not follow a symmetrical normal distribution, which is a common and dangerous misconception. 2. Understanding skewness. The chapter defines and illustrates positive right and negative left skewness, highlighting how a few extreme events can disproportionately impact the overall distribution of returns. 3. Underestimation of risk. It emphasizes that assuming normality for negatively skewed distributions leads to a severe underestimation of the probability and impact of rare catastrophic losses. 4. Beyond standard metrics. The core message is that traditional risk metrics are insufficient for skewed distributions, and a true understanding of risk requires acknowledging the asymmetry of financial outcomes. Chapter 6. Our Brains and Randomness, Cognitive Blindsides. In this crucial chapter, Our Brains and Randomness, Cognitive Blindsides, Nassim Nicholas Taleb directly addresses why humans are so persistently fooled by randomness. He argues that our brains are fundamentally wired to misinterpret chance, evolving to seek patterns and cause and effect relationships even where none genuinely exist. This innate pattern-seeking tendency, while useful in some survival contexts, creates significant cognitive blindsides when applied to inherently random or complex systems like financial markets. Taleb likely delves into several key cognitive biases that contribute to this misunderstanding. Central among them is the narrative fallacy, our powerful and often irresistible urge to construct coherent linear stories from sequences of random events, thereby imposing meaning and causality onto chaotic outcomes. For example, we create elaborate reasons for a stock's rise or fall, overlooking the substantial role of mere chance. He also examines confirmation bias, where we selectively notice and remember information that reinforces our pre-existing beliefs about skill or predictable patterns, while conveniently ignoring disconfirming evidence of randomness. The chapter would probably also discuss hindsight bias, making past random events seem entirely predictable in retrospect. I knew it all along. And the gambler's fallacy, the erroneous belief that past independent events influence future probabilities, e.g., after a string of losses, believing a win is due. By illustrating how these deeply ingrained mental shortcuts lead us to systematically misinterpret statistical noise as meaningful signals, Taleb highlights our profound human vulnerability to being deceived by the very randomness that shapes our lives and markets. Key takeaways. 1. Brain's pattern-seeking nature. Nassim Nicholas Taleb argues that our brains are fundamentally wired to see patterns in cause and effect, making us intuitively poor at processing true randomness. 2. The narrative fallacy. The chapter emphasizes our strong tendency to create coherent stories from random events, imposing false meaning and causality. 3. Key cognitive biases. It details how biases like confirmation bias, hindsight bias, and the gambler's fallacy contribute to our misinterpretation of random outcomes. 4. Inherent vulnerability. The core message is that these ingrained cognitive blindsides make us inherently susceptible to being fooled by the pervasive role of chance in life and markets. Chapter 7. Signal versus Noise, the Information Illusion. In this insightful chapter, Signal versus Noise, the Information Illusion, Nassim Nicholas Taleb explores one of the most critical challenges in understanding randomness, our inherent difficulty in distinguishing meaningful signal from mere random noise, especially in information-rich environments like financial markets. He argues that our brains, wired to find patterns as discussed in previous chapters, constantly strive to derive meaning even from purely random fluctuations, leading to a pervasive information illusion where more data doesn't necessarily lead to better understanding, but often to more confusion. Taleb highlights how our psychological biases contribute to this problem. Confirmation bias, for example, can lead us to selectively perceive signals that confirm our existing beliefs, even if they are just random occurrences. Our natural inclination for pattern recognition causes us to see trends or correlations in noisy data where none truly exist, such as finding definitive patterns in random stock charts. The chapter emphasizes how the narrative fallacy encourages us to weave compelling but false stories around these perceived signals, giving them an air of logic and predictability that is entirely absent. Taleb also critiques the role of financial media and experts who constantly generate explanations for daily market movements, effectively transforming random noise into seemingly rational narratives, thus reinforcing the illusion that events are understandable and predictable. The core message is that true understanding requires a deep skepticism towards information that promises certainty in inherently probabilistic domains, and a disciplined approach to filter out the overwhelming noise to find the elusive true signal. Key takeaways. 1. Distinguishing signal from noise. Nassim Nicholas Taleb explains the fundamental challenge of differentiating meaningful information from random fluctuations, particularly in data-heavy environments. 2. The information illusion. The chapter highlights that more information doesn't guarantee better understanding and often leads to overinterpretation of noise as a signal. 3. Biases in interpretation. It illustrates how cognitive biases like confirmation bias, pattern recognition, and the narrative fallacy compel us to find meaning in random data. Skepticism towards explanations. The core message emphasizes the importance of cultivating skepticism towards expert narratives and media explanations that often misinterpret noise as predictable events, urging a focus on robust strategies over short-term data analysis. Part 3. Living with Randomness. Chapter 8. Nonlinearities and the loser-takes-all effect. In this illuminating chapter, Nonlinearities and the loser-takes-all effect, Nassim Nicholas Taleb transitions to how we can better navigate and understand the implications of randomness in real-world outcomes. He introduces the concept of nonlinearities, explaining that in many complex systems, particularly financial markets, cause and effect are not proportional. This means that a small, seemingly insignificant change or random event can lead to a disproportionately large and often unpredictable consequence. Taleb then ties this directly to the loser-takes-all or winner-take-all effect. He argues that in highly competitive, scalable domains like investment banking, acting, or technology, success is not distributed normally, but rather follows a power law, where a tiny fraction of participants garners the vast majority of rewards, while the rest receive very little, regardless of their incremental differences in skill. This extreme disparity is amplified by randomness. A small initial stroke of luck or an early random advantage can be magnified through positive feedback loops in a nonlinear system, leading to exponential growth for one individual or firm, while equally talented competitors are marginalized. The chapter reveals how this phenomenon makes it incredibly difficult to discern skill from sheer luck, as the winners of such games may simply be those whose initial random path led to a highly favorable, disproportionately amplified outcome. Understanding these nonlinear dynamics is crucial for recognizing the inherent fragility of success based solely on past returns and for developing more robust strategies that account for extreme, unpredictable outcomes. Key takeaways. 1. Nonlinear outcomes. Nassim Nicholas Taleb explains that in complex systems, small inputs or random events can lead to disproportionately large or small outputs, defying linear cause and effect. 2. Winner-take-all effect. The chapter details how success in scalable domains is often concentrated among a very few individuals or entities, with the vast majority receiving little reward. 3. Randomness amplified. It highlights that small random advantages can be dramatically amplified in nonlinear systems, making it even harder to distinguish between skill and luck. 4. Implications for success and risk. The core message is that recognizing these disproportionate outcomes helps us understand why wealth and success are so unevenly distributed, and underscores the need for robust strategies that are resilient to extreme, unpredictable events. Chapter 9. Gamblers' Tics, Superstition, and Stoicism. In this highly insightful chapter, Gamblers' Tics, Superstition, and Stoicism, Nassim Nicholas Taleb explores humanity's varied and often contradictory responses to the pervasive presence of randomness. He begins by dissecting the irrational behaviors we adopt in the face of uncertainty, such as gamblers' tics and superstitions. These are often rituals or unfounded beliefs that provide a false sense of control or predictability over random outcomes, like a trader believing a certain pre-market routine influences their trading day. Taleb attributes these tendencies to our brain's innate, yet often maladaptive pattern-seeking nature, leading us to create non-existent causal links where only chance exists. He highlights how our inability to correctly distinguish between luck and skill leads to either exaggerated hubris in success or undue self-blame in failure, both of which are psychologically damaging. Crucially, Taleb then introduces Stoicism as a powerful philosophical antidote to the emotional turmoil caused by randomness. He champions Stoic principles, particularly the focus on controlling only what is within one's power, e.g., effort, process, attitude, and cultivating indifference to outcomes that are outside of one's control, e.g., market movements, random events. The chapter likely emphasizes premeditatio malorum, negative visualization, the Stoic practice of mentally preparing for worst-case scenarios to reduce their emotional impact if they materialize. By embracing Stoicism, Taleb argues, individuals can build profound emotional equanimity and resilience, enabling them to navigate the unpredictable landscape of financial markets and life with greater composure, focusing on the soundness of their decisions rather than being swayed by the capricious whims of fortune. Key takeaways. 1. Irrational responses to uncertainty. Nassim Nicholas Taleb details how humans develop superstitious behaviors and tics in an attempt to gain a false sense of control over random outcomes. 2. Emotional toll of randomness. The chapter highlights the psychological stress and misattributions that arise from our inability to correctly separate skill from luck. 3. Stoicism as a remedy. Taleb champions Stoic philosophy, emphasizing the importance of focusing on controllable actions and cultivating emotional detachment from uncontrollable outcomes. 4. Building resilience. The core message is that embracing Stoic practices, such as negative visualization, can foster robust emotional discipline and resilience, enabling better decision-making in a random world. Chapter 10, Conclusion, a philosophical stance on uncertainty. In this concluding chapter, Conclusion, a philosophical stance on uncertainty, Nassim Nicholas Taleb distills the profound insights from Fooled by Randomness into a cohesive philosophy for navigating a world dominated by chance. He reiterates the book's core arguments: the pervasive and often underestimated role of luck, the inherent flaws in inductive reasoning, our brain's systematic biases in interpreting randomness, and the deceptive nature of survivorship bias and skewed outcomes. Taleb emphasizes that true wisdom lies not in trying to predict the unpredictable, but in developing a robust philosophical stance that acknowledges and even embraces uncertainty. Taleb's conclusion is less about offering definitive answers and more about cultivating a resilient mindset. He champions the principle of via negativa, focusing on minimizing what can harm us by avoiding obvious sources of fragility and negative skew, rather than seeking to optimize for positive outcomes that might be a product of pure luck. He stresses the paramount importance of intellectual humility and profound skepticism towards narratives and predictions that ignore the true role of randomness. The chapter encourages a shift towards a process-oriented approach, where the focus is on making sound, principled decisions and building robust systems, rather than being swayed by the unpredictable, short-term fluctuations of outcomes. Ultimately, Taleb leaves the reader with a powerful message. By understanding our inherent biases and accepting the pervasive role of randomness, we can cultivate inner tranquility, make more rational choices, and live a life of integrity that is resilient to the arbitrary whims of fate. Key takeaways. 1. Recap of core arguments. Nassim Nicholas Taleb synthesizes the book's main themes: the overwhelming role of luck, our cognitive biases, and the dangers of skewed distributions and survivorship bias. 2. Embracing uncertainty. The chapter advocates for a philosophical stance that accepts and prepares for randomness, rather than denying or attempting to predict it. 3. Robustness over prediction. Taleb emphasizes building systems and making decisions that are robust to unexpected events, often through via negativa, eliminating fragility rather than optimization. 4. Process-oriented mindset. The core message is to focus on disciplined, principled decision-making and intellectual humility, rather than being swayed by short-term random outcomes to achieve long-term resilience and rationality. And that wraps up our profound dive into Fooled by Randomness, the hidden role of chance in life and in the markets, by Nassim Nicholas Taleb. What a mind-bending journey through the unseen forces that truly shape our lives and the financial world. Taleb has masterfully peeled back the layers of illusion, showing us how our brains are wired to misinterpret luck as skill and how survivorship bias and the narrative fallacy distort our understanding of success and risk. We've learned to question our certainty, embrace the power of alternative histories, and understand that extreme, nonlinear events are not just possible, but inevitable. This book empowers you to develop a more robust, probabilistic mindset and a powerful Stoic approach to navigating uncertainty, freeing you from the tyranny of outcomes and focusing on the integrity of your process. If you're ready to see the world through a clearer lens, challenge your own biases, and build anti-fragility into your decision-making, then Fooled by Randomness is an absolutely essential read. You can find the link to grab your copy in the description right below. Remember, here at PowerBooks, we believe knowledge is not power. The application of knowledge is power. And Taleb's insights provide the crucial understanding you need to apply that power in a world brimming with randomness. If this summary helped you think differently, hit that like button, subscribe to PowerBooks, and make sure to ring that notification bell so you don't miss our next empowering summary. Stay skeptical, stay humble, and keep striving for true wisdom. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on PowerBooks.